Today I'm going to give you 8 things that you must know before you fit a 12-volt fridge in your van. Very important things that you don't often think of until you've actually got it in there and you're using it. So these are my tips, and stick around to the end for 2 bonus tips about actually using that fridge. Hi, my name's Coralie. Welcome back to another video. This is my channel, Jump With No Fear. If you're thinking of building out a van and using it for camping or living in or long-term travel, whatever you like, these are 8 tips that I think are really important before you even think about fitting a fridge into your van. Now, the 2 types of fridges that I'll be talking about are just ones that I have had experience with. They are chest fridges and also drawer-style fridges. I have 2 drawer fridges that I intend to install in my van at some point, but currently, until I get to that point, I've been using a chest style fridge. My first tip to think about with 12-volt fridges in your van is, if you are going to have a chest style fridge, you will be able to use that as a seat or as bench space. But if you are planning to use it as bench space and as a seat, you'll have to remember that every time you need to access the fridge, you have to get off that bench, or you have to move all the things you've put on there. So if you don't have extra bench space in your van and the only bench space you have is the top of your chest fridge, you're gonna have to clear everything off if you've started cooking and you've got everything set up and then you remember there was one thing that you forgot in your fridge. So you have to clear it all off, lift up the lid of the chest fridge and then put it back down again, and then you can put everything back on top. So keep that in mind when you're deciding where you might put your fridge if you're going to have a chest fridge. My second thing that I think is important to know, if you have a chest style fridge and you decide that you'd like to put it into a drawer, the space where that drawer is going to slide out, you have to be able to keep it clear. It may be as simple as just moving people who sit in this space, or moving shoes, or moving other things that you store, but because you're in such a small space, where that drawer pulls out, you've got to make sure it's clear space most of the time, otherwise it gets old really fast having to shift everything. So for example, I've seen some people install drawer fridges so that they slide out here. But then of course you have to get out of your van every time you want to access the chest fridge. I've seen other people do it so that it slides from inside the van to inside the van. Then you have to remember that you are blocking that exit space, and if people like to sit here and gather around in your van, you'll have to shoo them off. And we actually tend to store shoes in this spot here just under the bed so that when we get out of bed we can put our shoes on. If we had a chest fridge here and I had to roll that out, I'd have to clear everything that was in the way here. And depending on how much space you have underneath that fridge, you might even have to lift up things like mats. Important tip number 3 that I think you need to consider before you even decide what sort of fridge you're going to have is how you might use a drawer fridge. There's some really great benefits to drawer fridges. For example, you can fit them under a bench. So if this was a bench space here, I could fit a drawer fridge under here, just like this drawer, pull it out, get what I need to and push it back, and you don't need to clear anything off the top of the bench space, which is fantastic. And that's the reason I actually have a couple of drawer fridges which I intend to install. But you need to know that drawer fridges are not tall. Chest fridges have a lot of height in them, especially the larger ones. Some chest fridges, as they get larger, instead of getting longer and wider, they get taller, which is actually really good because if you drink wine and you want to keep it cold, those are in tall bottles. With drawer fridges, they don't actually even fit a UHT 1 litre milk bottle. When I started playing with my drawer fridges, I realised that I couldn't even keep milk in there. So a UHT milk bottle to fit in a drawer fridge is about that much too tall. Maybe drawer fridges were invented by people who just want to take their vehicle out for a weekend and fill it with beers or cans of drink or something, because there's not that much more space sort of to fit things. It's probably about this tall. If you know what a UHT 1 litre milk container looks like, that gives you a good idea. The lid and a little bit of the top of that container is not going to fit upright in your drawer fridge. You can of course store things lying down, but then you need to keep in mind if the thing that you're storing lying down is going to leak. No one wants a big mess in the fridge. So you can easily get around it. You just have to think hard about what containers you might use in that fridge. Tip number 4, likewise with chest freezers that you install in a drawer, you need to be able to have that space where your drawer fridge slides out. You need to have it clear. Drawer fridges can be fitted up high, so it's a little bit less of an issue than if you had a big chest fridge in its own dedicated drawer. And because they're not as high, then you can fit them kind of like this, and you don't need to worry about what's underneath them. But you still do need to remember that when you are cooking in your van or whatever, and you've got bench space built around that drawer fridge or living areas or whatever, you need to give that space to slide out. So that's something to consider when you have a drawer fridge. If you've been enjoying this so far, please don't forget to hit the like button and hit subscribe as well if you haven't already, because then you can hit the notification bell and you'll know when I upload new videos. So please do that if you're enjoying this video. Important tip number 5 that you need to think about before you purchase a fridge or decide on which sort of fridge you're going to get for your van is cost. The prices vary a lot. Now, the fridge that I've got behind me here is a Brass Monkey fridge. Now, they are at the cheaper end. I have found they're actually really good quality for the price. And a lot of tradies seem to use the Brass Monkey fridges. They seem to have them bouncing around the back of their utes for years and they love them. So they get pretty good reviews. I actually downgraded from a Dometic chest fridge to the Brass Monkey fridge behind me. The reason I did that is because I wanted to have a dual zone fridge, and the Brass Monkey, at least at the time, was the only one that had a dual zone fridge as small as the one I have. If I recall correctly, it's 36 litres, and that's not very big. But for Alexis and I, that's heaps of space. Now, if you buy a cheaper fridge, there are things that make it cheaper, obviously, but it's important what things they choose to cheap out on that will affect how that fridge works. Now, from my experience with the Dometic and with the Brass Monkey, the things they've cheaped out on is the outer casing. The moulding is a little bit not as finessed as the Dometic fridge. For example, where the corners are, where the moulding sort of meets the corner, or when they inject the plastic into the mould, they haven't necessarily been filed off or shaved off quite as smoothly as they have on the more expensive fridge. So it's not a big deal, and that's something you can easily solve. Something that is a bit of a bigger deal is that on the cheaper fridges, they tend to cheap out on the insulation. I know that my Brass Monkey fridge doesn't operate quite as efficiently as my Dometic fridge did, but for the advantage of having the dual zone, for me it was worth it. So you have to keep that in mind. And if one of the things they've cheaped out on is something like the insulation, you will find that you get condensation on the outside of the fridge. You can solve that with things like a fridge cover, but it is something you need to keep in mind, because you need to allow that the fridge may drip condensation down the outside and onto the surface that it's sitting on. So you need to make sure you take account of that and keep an eye on it. With my Dometic fridge, I didn't ever get any condensation on the outside. With my Brass Monkey fridge, I have got condensation on the outside. Important thing number 6, if you are thinking about putting a fridge in your van, is that fridge covers are absolutely worth it. Now, unfortunately, they're quite expensive. Each fridge has to have one custom made for the fridge itself, because you need little vents where all the air has to go out and all that, and every vent on every fridge is in a slightly different spot, and it has to have the space for the plugging in and all that sort of thing. It gives you that little bit of extra insulation, so if you do have a condensation problem on the outside of your fridge, like I do with my Brass Monkey here, that will help to solve that. And of course, it'll help to keep your fridge colder in warm weather and give you more efficient use of your power as well. So as expensive as they are, and as overpriced as I think they are for what you're getting, considering how much it would cost them to make it, it really is worth getting a fridge cover. So if you're considering a fridge, make sure you find out how much the fridge cover that fits that fridge is, and take that into account in your budget. Important thing number 7 to remember before you even consider a fridge for your van: if you choose a compressor type fridge, they cycle on and off. They're not just a constant hum. So if noises in your van will wake you and you're a light sleeper, it's not going to be a constant hum. It's going to turn itself on and it's going to turn itself off. So sometimes it'll be going with this little quiet sort of hum, and then it's going to cycle off again. Thank you, bird, you're very loud. Think about where you're going to put that in your vehicle. If that motor noise is going to keep you awake, put it further away from you, or make sure it's enclosed in some way with enough breathing room, because that's important, so that the noise of the motor won't keep you awake. Related to that, important thing to remember, number 8, is that the compressor noise, when it's going on and off, it can actually vary a lot from fridge to fridge. Now, you might think that a more expensive compressor fridge would be a little more quiet when it turns on and when it turns off. That goes through that cycle, but that's not necessarily the case. So with my Dometic fridge, I found that it made somewhat of a clunk when it turned on or off. When I then downgraded, so to speak, to my Brass Monkey, which is the cheaper fridge, when it cycles on and off, it's more of a gentle winding up and winding down. It's not like a sudden noise like the Dometic was. So again, if you're a light sleeper, keep that in mind. Not all fridges are the same. If you can actually check out fridges of friends or campers nearby you, you can ask them what they think about their fridge. If they're a heavy sleeper, they might have never noticed it, but it's good to actually see if you can witness these fridges going through their cycling on, cycling off, so you can get an idea of how they sound. Because it surprised me that my Brass Monkey was actually a bit more quiet and gentle and slow when it cycled on and then off again than the Dometic fridge. So that's something really important to think about if you're a light sleeper. Now I have a couple of bonus tips for you. If you've got a fridge with a cover on it, which as I said is absolutely worth having, don't store things for long periods between the fridge cover and the fridge itself, especially if you've got a fridge that doesn't have excellent insulation in it. I used to store this little cutting board in there, and I stopped camping, remembered that it was there, came back, and it started to get a little bit moldy. There's tiny little stains from the mold there. If anything is stored in there and your fridge does get condensation on the outside, you are going to end up with mold. Just make sure you air everything out when you've finished using your fridge and you pack it away for a little while to make sure there's no moisture stuck in there. And my second bonus tip, don't go overboard with size. Even if you have a large space in your van or whatever vehicle you're traveling in, don't get a fridge much bigger just because you think you might need the space. It's going to take a lot more energy to run that fridge. Estimate what size fridge you think you need and try to stick within those limits. If you need to experiment with how much space you think you're going to need, because it's a bit hard to conceptualize when you're just looking at a fridge what is actually going to fit in there, build yourself a pretend fridge. Find out the dimensions of the fridge you're interested in and the size of that fridge that you're interested in. Get all of the dimensions from the inside, including if they have wire baskets, and build yourself like a little cardboard mock-up of the fridge. And then take all the things from your own fridge at home that you're going to take camping with you and try to fit them in and see how well they'll fit in. A friend gave me that advice for deciding what size fridge I needed, and it was the most valuable advice, and that was what helped me decide what size fridge I need. If you've made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. Thank you to my Patreon members who have supported me for ages now. If you would like to join my Patreon, there's a link in the description. It doesn't cost very much. There are 3 different tiers and each tier gets the same benefits. So you can join and see stupid little thoughts I have through the week, not necessarily camping related, but just things that I think of that you might enjoy. So that's a bit of the other side of me if you join my Patreon for that. Thank you again for watching. Please hit the like button if you haven't already and subscribe if you haven't. That'd be awesome. Hit the little notification bell and get notifications so that you know when I upload a video next time. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye. These are 8 tips that I think you will find useful before you even think about putting a van in your fridge.